I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily 2021 in Review. Thanks for joining us as we take a look back at some of the most interesting, thought-provoking, and challenging conversations from the past year. As the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic continues, we took a look at the ongoing research and developments related to the rapid rise and spread of the Omicron COVID-19 variant. The world continues to react to the emergence of the latest COVID-19 variant called the Omicron variant. Many countries are reevaluating their procedures at airports. Recently, Canada's health minister said the rollout of new rules at airports will depend on the capacity to immediately begin testing arriving air travelers. Meanwhile, as researchers continue to learn more about Omicron, the WHO warns that travel bans are having an impact on global cooperation efforts around the new variant. This is by delaying shared laboratory samples from South Africa, where the variant was first reported. Well, joining us now to tell us more about what we know so far about this new Omicron variant is Dr. Robert Hecht, professor of clinical epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. Doctor, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much.
Now, how does the Omicron variant compare to the other variants of COVID-19 that we already know about?
Well, there's still a lot we don't know about the Omicron virus. We do know that it's highly transmissible, and that's the most frightening, most worrying thing about it. We know that it's many hundreds of times more transmissible than the earlier variants, the Alpha and Delta, even the Delta variant, which has spread so widely. So this is a great cause for concern. What we don't know and what we need to find out as soon as possible in the coming days, we certainly hope, is how severe the illness is connected with Omicron infection. We don't know if a person who's infected is more likely to have severe illness and respiratory symptoms and failure and require hospitalization and face the threat of death. It could turn out that Omicron is relatively mild, even though it's very infectious. The other thing we don't know about it yet is how well the current vaccines that we have at our disposal will work to prevent breakthrough infections of the kind we've seen with Delta. We don't know how often that's going to happen with Omicron.
So there's lots to still find out about the Omicron variant, Doctor. Well, there is talk about implementing nationwide booster shots of COVID-19 vaccine to counter this. But how likely is this going to be our last dose of COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, we'll see. My colleagues and I have been anticipating that boosters would be needed for some time now, even before the first countries like Israel moved to the booster program. And here in the United States, where I live, where the program started out mainly targeted at those over the age of 65 and rapidly, as we expected, expanded to all those who are currently eligible for the first round of vaccine. So this was something we expected. We saw that the initial doses that people were receiving back in the winter and in the spring were starting to wane. And this is not surprising. We have this with other vaccines that we give to children against childhood illnesses of one kind or another, against diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. We have to boost them several times. We do this for a wide range of vaccine preventable illnesses. So we're not surprised. Whether another round of vaccination will be required, or even whether we may be looking to the vaccine companies to develop new versions of their vaccines that are better targeted at Omicron. This is, again, one of the things we're going to find out in the coming months. But I think everyone now who's been facing COVID, who is concerned about her or his own health, that of their family and of their community and of their nation, realize that we need to buckle our seatbelts metaphorically and be prepared for unknowns and for a rough ride. So one of the things we need to combat here is a sense of fatigue or desperation on the part of the population, people thinking that with a single dose of a vaccine or even a double round that things are going to be fine, that it'll all be over. I think we have to be prepared to be in this for the long haul. and to accept the fact that we still don't know certain things about this virus, how it changes, and we're still improving the arsenal of vaccines and drugs to deal with both preventing infection and minimizing the negative health effects of people who do become infected.
All right, Dr. Robert Hecht, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have been released after over 1,000 days of captivity in China. Former ambassador to China, Guy Saint-Jacques, says the events leading up to the return of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have severely tarnished China's reputation. He says the Chinese were so eager to get Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou back that they dropped all pretensions that the men had been arrested for good reasons. Meanwhile, concerns are rising among experts over China's use of hostage diplomacy. This is something that Mr. Guy Saint-Jacques has predicted for quite some time. The former ambassador to China joins us now on Forum Daily. Sir, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, you have indicated that the events leading to the return of the two Michaels have tarnished China's reputation. Can you tell us a little bit more on this?
Well, I would say that since Mrs. Meng was arrested and then the two Michaels, we have learned a lot more about the dark side of China. And for instance, we know about the genocide going on in Xinjiang, repression in Hong Kong, in Tibet, what China is doing in the South China Sea, and also how badly they managed the pandemic at the outset. And I think that Canada had a very successful strategy when it went to rally support from other countries. And as a result, a number of foreign leaders raised the case of the two Michael with the Chinese leaders, which was a surprise for them. And then last February, Canada was piloting this declaration against arbitrary detention in state-to-state relation. So I think that China probably feels that hostage diplomacy worked this time, but also, if they are honest, they will realize that their reputation was tarnished, that other countries have taken notice. And I think now to prevent future occurrence of hostage diplomacy, Canada should develop criteria that would be used to trigger common reactions by the countries that have signed this declaration, including sanctions.
All right, sir. Now, on the other hand, we have the Chinese government saying that the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor was for health reasons. So what do you make of that statement and the timing of their release?
Well, you know, the statement that they issued yesterday, I could have written that in advance because this was predictable. They did the same thing when they released Kevin Garrett back in September 2016. And of course, in this case, what is surprising with the speed of the release is that I think we have to be grateful to President Biden because he is the one who spoke with Xi Jinping and told him that the two Canadians had to release. And so China just dropped any pretension that the two were subject to a normal, transparent judicial process.
All right, sir, just about 2 minutes left here. But what sort of policies should our Canadian government take regarding China moving forward after all of this?
Well, I think we should base our policy on based on the defense and protection of our values and interests. Of course, we have to be a lot more selective in our engagement strategy. We have to adopt a much stronger stance. I hope that Canada will recover its voice to criticize what's going on in China in relation to human rights abuses. Also, we need to work with partners to fend off the bullying tactics of China, including when they use trade as a weapon. And if we are in good company, we may be able to force China to change its behavior.
All right, sir, 1.5 minutes left. But talking about trade, we know China has applied to join the CPTPP free trade bloc. How should member countries, including Canada, respond to this?
Well, on that, the overall message to China should be, we have no problem if China wants to play a bigger role on the international scene. We recognize that it's a superpower, but it has to play by the rules. It has to respect its word, and it should be welcome to the CPTPP if they promise to deliver on the commitments they made, for instance, when they joined the WTO in 2001. And in fact, we should put very strict conditions, including that they allow for greater competition by foreign firms, that they stop subsidies to their state-owned enterprises. And I think they won't be able to meet these criteria for some time.
All right, sir, just about 30 seconds left here, but there are still over 100 Canadians detained in China, including Robert Schellenberg, who's sentenced to die. Can you tell us a little bit about the futures of these individuals here?
Well, I'm afraid that, we have 4 people on death row in China. I hope that the government can negotiate in the case of Mr. Schellenberg, and that they will revert his sentence to the previous one, which I think was 14 years. For the others, there's a big problem because many of those are Canadians of Chinese origin, and it will continue to be an irritant in the relationship.
Today marks the first annual National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. This day provides an opportunity for all Canadians to recognize and commemorate the tragic history and ongoing legacy of residential schools. This federal statutory holiday will also coincide with Orange Shirt Day. The day was created by an Indigenous-led grassroots movement to honor those who survived Indian residential schools and to remember those who did not. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation also allows Canadians to look toward the future of Indigenous reconciliation within Canada. With us today to talk more on this is Mr. Elmer St. Pierre, the National Chief for the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. Welcome to Forum Daily, Chief St. Pierre.
Thank you very much.
Now, what does the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation mean to you as well as the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples as a whole?
Today is a very sad day. We need to remember the children that went to these schools but never returned.
Right, sir. And can you speak a little bit about the residential school system, how it impacted you and the members of your own community itself?
Well, with CAP and our communities, the impact was they took our children away from us. And family within our community is the most important thing. It gives us that's where we learn our culture, our tradition, as well as it's a gathering for us. And with that, it took a lot away from our families. And a lot of our families are still suffering over this, the ones where the children never come home.
And what does the future of reconciliation in Canada look like for you, sir?
Well, once we get things rolling and the government working, and as well as our own people working toward it, it's a rebuilding of our nation. And we want to have all of our Indigenous people, no matter who they are, is to have a genuine life and don't have to worry about this ever happening again.
All right, sir. So what are some next steps that the Canadian government needs to take in order to reach this particular goal?
Well, one of the big things is the government has to act on the Cap Daniels case, which was handed down today. This year is their 5th anniversary of that. And in that, the Cap Daniels, they really put some emphasis on the government to act on this. And that's the big thing. We got to get the Liberal government to talk to all of the Indigenous people, communities, not just a couple of them. And we really need him the Prime Minister, to talk to CAP to see where we can go with this.
All right, sir. And what about the individual Canadians that are watching this interview right now? What kind of steps can they take to aid the process of reconciliation?
Well, what I see is that all the other Canadians, they have to learn. They have to learn about the survivor or the residential schools, when it started and when it ended. Like I believe it was 1998 is when it ended, which is not that far, past us. And unfortunately, it was Mr. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was the last one to started the last 4 schools, residential schools. And if we can study the history, all the other Canadians, all of us, there's some Aboriginal people that don't really know the history neither. So if we all studied that history and find out who, where things went wrong and why did it go wrong, then hopefully the people will understand, okay, this is a big mistake. Something's got to be done.
Yes, sir. Well, some very important history to learn there, sir. Just about 30 seconds left in this interview. But before we go, tell us a little bit more about the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, their mission and goals for the future.
The Congress of Aboriginal People, we've been around for 50 years. Actually, this year is our 50th anniversary. And our goal is always to fight for our grassroots people and to make sure they have exactly what they need, the education, housing, and hopefully, again, we need to talk to the Prime Minister. Like he's been in office for 6 years. He's never reached out to us. I've been in office for 1 year. Next week, I'm in 1 year, and he has never reached out to me. I've reached out to him many times, and never once has he reached back out to sit down and see where we want to go. And we just want a better life for all of our Aboriginal people, our grassroots people, and it's not much to ask for.
All right, Chief St. Pierre, we really appreciate you joining us on Forum Daily and sharing your message. BC residents who've been affected by the province's devastating floods are being encouraged to take care of their mental health. Caroline McDonald Harker, an expert in the psychological and social impacts of disasters on families, says her studies of extensive flooding in southern Alberta and the wildfire that devastated Fort McMurray found lasting effects. She says those included anxiety, depression, or even post-traumatic stress disorder, adding the signs that someone may be having trouble coping after disaster can include changes in appetite or sleeping patterns. To tell us more about how natural disasters can impact the mental health of those affected is Dr. Caroline McDonald Harker herself, professor in the sociology department at Mount Royal University. Dr. McDonald Harker, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, what do we know so far about how disasters may impact people in the long run?
What we know and what my research findings have shown is that major disasters have not only devastating impacts on physical infrastructure like homes, buildings, and wider communities, but they also have long-term mental health impacts on individuals who are both directly and indirectly impacted by disasters. And in fact, the mental health effects following disaster are so profound that they last much longer than the visible destruction caused by disaster, with some people still suffering effects even 10 years later.
Now, that's very interesting, Doctor. So we mentioned you studied the impacts of flooding and wildfires in Alberta. What did you find?
Certainly. What I found from my research is that it can take several years before people who experience a disaster even notice the mental toll it has taken on them. Oftentimes, people don't deal with some of the mental health challenges that they are experiencing. They keep putting it off, thinking that if they focus on rebuilding and getting their home back in order, then the mental health challenges will go away. But often they don't. And unfortunately, at that point, their mental health challenges have become exacerbated. And so my research has also found that strong communication, support systems, and a positive outlook were better able to help individuals cope and move forward after experiencing a disaster.
So taking all of this into consideration, how do you think the BC flooding is likely to impact the mental health of people in the region?
Based on my research on the 2013 Alberta flood and the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire, it's highly likely that individuals will experience either short-term or long-term mental health challenges. Disasters are stressful. They are traumatic experiences, and there are specific populations that are more vulnerable to the effects of disasters, including women, children and youth, immigrant populations. And so it's crucial that mental health supports, resources, services, and other supports are accessible to individuals, not only during disasters, but also in the post-disaster context.
All right, doctor. So how can someone identify if they or a loved one has been mentally affected by a disaster?
it's really important to notice if one's behavior has changed. So, are people sleeping more or less? Are they eating more or less? Are they more irritable? Are they utilizing substances as a way to cope? So certainly important to pay attention to how you're reacting. And of course, experiencing stress is very normal in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. But if it ends up being prolonged, then that's when individuals really need to pay attention and reach out for some of those formalized supports. And I know that that's easier said than done. A lot of people are reluctant to access formalized supports. And so my recommendation is always that they reach out to their own immediate network, that they are open and honest with people in their environment, and they talk with them about the challenges that they are facing.
And we know BC is now implementing recovery efforts following this flooding. So is there anything that government officials can do to tackle this issue?
Absolutely. It's essential that governments, whether that be at the federal, provincial, or municipal level, become better prepared for disasters. We know that disasters are occurring at increased frequency, and they're likely to continue to occur. Therefore, it is crucial that government bodies engage in disaster mitigation efforts, that they develop disaster relief programs, and that they help residents better understand disaster risk and preparedness so that individuals are better prepared the next time they face a disaster.
30 seconds left here, Doctor, but what are you keeping your eyes out for as BC is recovering from all of this?
Absolutely. Certainly, there is a lot of emphasis on the physical rebuilding. However, it's important that mental health supports are provided to individuals at the same time concurrently, as opposed to waiting months or years later, because individuals do need those immediate supports.
All right, Dr. McDonald-Harker, thank you so much for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily Best of 2021. Thanks for joining us as we took a look back at some of the most interesting, thought-provoking, and challenging conversations we have had on Forum Daily over the past year. Be sure to visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and we'll see you later. Take care, Canada.